Hello, good evening, everybody. My name is Louise Maguire, and I'll be leading this evening's webinar. We are expecting a few more people to join us, but rather than wait, we'll make a start because the first section is just housekeeping. So today's webinar, we have SFI Pilot and Test and Trials Farmers, and we're giving you an update on the recent announcement that we made on our new schemes and what's going to be happening in 2024. So we're just going to summarise that for you and give you a quick run through. So just on housekeeping, if you need help with the webinar functions, please let us know in the chat. So there is a chat. It is a webinar this evening, so you'll be able to see the panelists. So there's me and Liz and Sam who will be doing the presenting this evening, and some of my other team who are going to be helping to answer questions in the background. But you won't be able to see each other. So if you've got a technical issue, please pop it in the chat and one of my team will reach out to help you as soon as they can. We have the Q&A function this evening, so if you do have a question, please use the Q&A button to submit it. So the Q&A function, if you are joining us on a laptop, is down the bottom of the screen, and you will see several icons come up, and one of them is a Q&A icon that you can click on, and that brings up the Q&A. What I will say is please do listen to the presentations first. So we ran this earlier today, and a number of the questions were answered in the presentation. So I'll give you a little bit of time to put some questions in the Q&A before we start. So please don't think that you've got to be busily writing the Q&A and not listening. So please do give us the opportunity to answer some of your questions that you've got. So we'll do our best to answer as many questions as we can. So we got quite a few questions this afternoon when we ran the webinar. We answered as many of those as we can. As I said, my team will answer some of those in the background, so we may not need to cover all of them. We won't be answering specific questions about your agreement, whether that's an SFI pilot agreement that you've got in place or another agreement. But if you do have any questions specifically about your agreement, we'd recommend that you email the Rural Payments Agency, and we've got the address up there for you, the email address up there for you if you don't know it. If you do have a pilot agreement and you want, if you want to copy us in, please do so, and our pilot learning address is there. Today's session will also be recorded, so we are going to share the recording for farmers that weren't able to join us and to listen in. And also, if you want to listen back at any time and listen to any of the questions, you'll be able to do so. And we'll also be sharing a copy of the slides so you can have a look at those. So what's the purpose of today? So you'll be aware that we have made a recent announcement following the Oxford Farming Conference and gave a bit of an update in terms of what we're going to do this year and what we're going to roll out. So Sam and I are going to cover the announcement and some of the high level things that were covered in the announcement just to take you through that, and so you're aware of what we've announced. We're going to then hand over to Liz, and Liz is going to take you through what this means, particularly if you have a pilot agreement. You should find that section really useful, but equally if you have a countryside stewardship agreement or another agri-environment agreement, that should be useful for you. Then finally, we are going to turn to that Q&A, and hopefully we'll have between 10 to 15 minutes left to answer any of your questions that you may have. So if we move on to the agricultural transition update. So it is one of the biggest updates that we've had since the start of the agricultural transition. And what we've done is when we published the agricultural transition plan back in 2021, we said we'd update it regularly to publish updates to tell you where we've got to and how far we've got through that. And the announcement that we made last week was essentially one of those updates of how far we've got and where we were going next. So in terms of the aim, we're still maintaining those key aims that we've always had for the programme. And just to remind you of those, because I think it's important to keep that in mind, it's maintaining resilient food production, improving farm productivity, and making sure that we make those contributions to our statutory targets to restore nature and reach net zero by 2050. So our aim is that by 2028, we need to see widespread adoption of the schemes. And what we've said is that we want to see at least 70% of farmers and 70% of land manager and 70% of land within our environmental land management schemes. So we want farmers delivering environmental actions alongside food production. The schemes that we've introduced thus far and what we're hoping to introduce this year, we hope will help us meet those challenging objectives. So the announcement just gave you an indication of what we're doing this year, and what we plan to announce. So the first big area that we're going to cover today is the updated payment rates. So I'll take you through this a bit more in more detail in the next slide. But essentially, what we've done is announce an update to all the payment rates, whether you've got a sustainable farming incentive agreement, whether you're in the pilot, or whether you're in countryside stewardship. We are going to expand the offer, so the sustainable farming offer that we've got, that we launched in 2023, we will expand that again in 2024, and we've got up to 50 new actions that we will introduce this year. And the other thing that we've announced is that we're moving to a single streamlined application process for sustainable farm incentive and countryside stewardship, where there will be one application portal for you to apply for actions within those schemes. So if we move on to the next slide, please. So just touching on important payment rates. So this is a message that we've heard clearly from both working with our farmers, both in the pilot and in tests and trials. And we've heard that it's really important for us to to look at the rates and make sure that you're getting paid fairly for what you're doing and the actions that you're adopting. So we wanted to make sure that we had a fair price across our schemes and to encourage you to carry on doing what you're doing, but to also encourage uptake for those that aren't in an agri-environment scheme. So what we've done is we've looked at our payment rates and recalculated them using the latest cost and income forgone data. So the change in payment rates may be different for different actions we've got in place, and that was a question we had earlier, but that is why, because we've used it on the recent data that we've got about costs and input prices. So therefore the cost will depend on what you've got in your agreement. But what we are saying is that on average, for if you are an SFI or a countryside stewardship agreement holder, the values will increase by around 10%. What we will do is publish shortly on the SFI Pilot guidance pages the updated rates that are applicable to SFI Pilot agreements, and they will be in place from the start of year 3 of your agreements going on. So it really depends when year 3 started. So I recognise that some of you started year 3 agreement back in November, and your payment, that your next quarterly payment, therefore should reflect the updated rates. For those of you that don't go into the 3rd year of your agreement until February or March later this year, the updated rates will apply from then. So they will. That's how we're working it with the pilot. For countryside stewardship, it's slightly different, as the rates will change from the 1st of January for the start of the current agreement year. So what's our intention behind this? So we hope that our price to keep them up to date and they are attractive to you, and keep up with agricultural markets. So just a brief note on higher level stewardship agreements under environmental stewardship. So we haven't updated those prices, and the reason that we've done that is because those work differently to our other schemes, because they're based on a whole farm approach. So it is our intention to phase those out rather than to continue to update them. If you do have a live countryside stewardship or sustainable farming incentive agreement that you've entered, either one that you entered into 22 or in the 23 scheme, you don't need to do anything to benefit, and we will automatically apply those rates, and that applies to the pilot too. Before we move on, I just wanted to mention improved incentives to create and maintain habitats. So this is another message that we've heard clearly from farmers, both in the pilot and in tests and trials. So historically, we have paid much higher prices for actions involving creating or restoring habitats and features and lower prices to maintain them. And I've heard this with numerous conversations, whether it be at face-to-face events with our pilot farmers and test and trials farmers, or it being learning activities. And you've told us that that's a barrier for those that have undertaken the creation restoration, and you feel you're at an unfair disadvantage. So we've looked at this, we've took it away and looked at it and looked at ways to rebalance the payments for creation and restoration and maintenance so that we can incentivize those that have already done that creation piece and to reward you for already doing that. So what we're doing is we're changing the structure of the grassland habitat offers by merging the management and creation revenue actions and adjusting the payment rate to a point between management and creation. But to supplement that, we're also creating a separate capital offer for creation of all grassland habitat. And we hope that together these changes will enable us to increase the regular revenue payments and pay the full upfront costs of creation. So we hope that's a welcome change, and we thank you for your continued feedback on that. We just wanted to share that with you because that was one of the key messages that we've heard consistently through the pilot. So if we move on to the next slide, please. And I just wanted to cover the new and expanded offer. So the 50 thereabouts, the 50 new or updated and reviewed actions that we've announced that we're going to be able to offer in 2024. So farming is a diverse sector, and we know that through working with the farmers that we have in tests and trials and in the pilot. And we have a variety of different types of farms that we work with in different sectors and tenures in terms of tenanted farms, but also mixed tenure farms. So we need to design the offer with taking that into account so there is something for everybody. And the pilot and test and trials has been really helpful for us to collate all that information and know what works and what doesn't work for those particular farmers, so that will help. That has helped us create and craft and adapt the offers that we've got. So we're going to introduce around 50 actions to the offer from 2024. And we hope that that will make the offer more attractive to a greater range of farm types and locations, which will in turn help us meet our targets. So what does the offer look like? So we are offering a significantly improved offer for farmers with moorland, recognising the importance of that habitat. We've got new actions coming on stream for agroforestry and precision farming, supporting the recovery of priority habitats and threatened native species, enhancing and restoring water bodies and watercourses, protecting lowland peat, and new actions for permissive footpaths, cycleways and bridle paths, and an expanded education offer. So we've really looked at what we're delivering already through countryside stewardship, what's working, what the barriers are, and what the gaps are, so that we can introduce that offer into 2024. So I won't tell you too much about that because Sam's going to run through a summary of the themes that's contained in the new actions. We did think about going through every single one of the actions, but because there's 50 of them, it can take a little bit of time. So we've picked out the key things that Sam is going to go through in a bit more detail. We will confirm details of timescales a bit later around these actions and when we hope them to come on stream. And that'll be later in 2024. Before we go to Sam to take you through more of the detail, I just wanted a note on improving our services. So again, this is something where we've had lots of feedback from our farmers, both in the pilot and in tests and trials. And what you've told us is that you want us to remove those barriers so we can make it more straightforward and accessible for you to deliver our environmental ambition. So we were really pleased to announce last week that from this summer, farmers will be able to apply for countryside stewardship and the Sustainable Farming Incentive Actions together through a single application process. So what we're hoping is that this will remove the complexity of managing applications and actions across multiple schemes. So you don't need to apply for countryside stewardship at one time and the Sustainable Farming Incentive at another time. So we're hoping that applications will begin later on in the summer, but the first agreements for the new offer will be starting later this year. So we also intend for SFI and the new CS mid-tier to have a rolling application window in 2024. So this will be, some of you will be already familiar with this if you do have a current pilot agreement where you can amend and update your agreement in any 12-month period if you want to add in actions or add in more land, and we call that your annual change period. And we've tested that through the pilot and it's worked really well. So again, if you do enter into the new scheme or if you're already in SFI 23, you will get that annual change opportunity to annually update your application and add more into there if you wish to do so. Just a note on CS higher tier, so we will continue to operate a separate application process for higher tier agreements, but we will offer the agreements through a simpler, clearer and faster service. So usually the window to apply for higher tier countryside stewardship opens in February, but that won't be happening this year. But we will be publishing more details about when we will open that window and what that will look like. But staying with the theme of higher tier, what we have done is make some of the actions that are currently available, only available through Countryside Stewardship higher tier, through our other offers. So this will mean that where appropriate, more farmers can access these more ambitious elements, that the support that they need to carry out on their farms without having the need to enter into a higher tier agreement. So we think that's a really positive change as well, and something that, again, that we've heard feedback on from our farmers and land managers. So the offer from 2024 will build on that offer that we've got in 2023. In SFI, we've made it possible to combine multiple actions. So again, something that we've learned from the pilot, introducing that pick and mix approach that we've got, and we will continue to build and extend that sort of flexibility into 2024 and beyond. And you will be able to undertake those combinations of actions that work for your farm to deliver those bigger, better outcomes that we're seeking to achieve. So if you already have an existing agreement in SFI, you will be able to take on board some of these new actions in 2024, as long as you're not being paid twice for the same outcome and the actions that are compatible. So you can add into your existing agreement if you wish to do so. You can also take out an additional agreement. So say you have an SFI agreement and you're completely happy with that and you want to leave it as is, and you want to take out an additional agreement covering some of the new offers that we launch in 2024, you can do that and have 2 agreements running. It's completely up to you and how you want to do it. So if we go to the next slide, please. So finally, just before I hand over to Sam, I just wanted to note on removing barriers. So farmers you need to be able to adapt your business to become more sustainable and productive. And in some circumstances, these changes can require planning permission or other consents. And what we want to do is help you make those necessary changes to your business. And that might mean through benefit in nature, through perhaps building ponds, driving efficiency and resilience, such as creating reservoirs, or even diversifying your income, and that may mean creating retail space or holiday cottages. So what are we doing on that front? And this was one part of the announcement last week. So we are working to expand permitted rights developments. So these allow the government to grant planning permission in advance for specified types of developments, and we'll be working with those to expand that offer. The government is already delivering permitted development rights to support rural diversification, but we are looking at changes to put more temporary campsites, for example, and to deliver more rooftop solar and electricity generation. So there's things that we're aware, we've had feedback, and we're acting on that feedback. Also this year, we're going to have more advice available through the Sustainable Farming Advice offer, and we're going to have more opportunities for productivity grants that'll be coming up. So please do look out for look out on the blog for those opportunities that are coming up soon. So I think at that point, I will hand over to Sam, who will take you through the thematic areas. Sam?
Thanks, Louise, and evening to everybody, and thanks for coming along this evening. Good to see we've got quite a few questions coming up already, so that's good, and hopefully we can cover off a few more of those. So I just wanted to run through some of the sort of additional areas and some of the particular new actions that are coming in. So first of all, we wanted to, as well as sort of expanding the offer, so we're sort of getting towards a more comprehensive scheme, and as Louise has just said, combining or enabling you to combine SFI actions and CS options into sort of a single agreement or a single way of applying, will hopefully make things much more comprehensive. But we also know that if we really want to sort of meet our targets, our sort of 70% and 70%, and going beyond that to some of our sort of wider environmental targets as set out in the environmental improvement plan, we probably need to be more ambitious. There are a number of actions that we have within the schemes that if they're sort of if we can do more of those, then we're more likely to get towards those targets. Particularly some of those actions that are important for designated sites like our SSIs and along water courses and places like that. But we also know that certainly from the research we've done, from talking to lots of you in the pilot and some of our test and trials work that we've been doing, that obviously particularly some of these more complex and sometimes harder to deliver actions require greater incentives to do that, and particularly through sort of payment rates as well. So it's sort of a first sort of time we've done this through certainly our new schemes, but we'll be introducing from this year, so when the offer does open, a set of premium payment for actions that have the sort of greatest environmental impact. And we've got our initial sort of set of 21 actions that will be subject to these premium payments, that will have higher rates than we would normally offer for those, and will, as I say, hopefully help us to achieve the environmental outcomes that we're looking to. What we've done, as Louise mentioned, we've put in an annex of these slides, which we'll give you a copy of after the webinars. A list of the actions and the payment rates, the premium payment rates, as well, so you can have a look and sort of digest them in a bit more time. But I'm not going to go sort of through all of them. But certainly there are sort of the ones you would expect. So actions for Lowland Peat and Lowland Heath, sort of maintenance, things like providing habitats for lapwings, and sort of actions that help us with water quality and habitat creation, and some of those, and some of the moorland actions also are subject to premium payments as well. So there's a list of those, and we're going to keep those under review on a sort of a continuing basis as well, to make sure that we've got those right, and that we're getting the uptake that we need to do that. So in addition to premium payments, we're also looking at incentives for combinations of actions that when you sort of do them together and at scale, again, that they help to sort of provide us with sort of greater environmental output. So sort of slightly similar to those of you that are in the pilot and have been sort of doing bundles of actions together in our standards. It's a similar sort of approach, but looking at where we can bring several actions together, and when somebody agrees to sign up, to do those all together, then we can put in some additional incentives on that. So we're still finalizing which actions will fit into the incentive combination, and how we're going to put that incentive sort of financially together, but when we get towards publishing the sort of more details in the handbook later in the year, then there'll be more details about that. But we want to sort of give you some early updates on that. From a flexibility point of view, we've looked at the actions and particularly looked at some of the review some of the countryside stewardship options and trying to make them as flexible as possible, responding to things like the ROC review that was looking at tenants, tenant farmers, and the agreements that tenants have more generally. So we're looking at reducing as many as we can to 3-year agreements rather than the longer sort of 5 years and 10 years. And I think we've even got some actions that will be coming out that will be 2 years. So they fit a lot more into sort of the tenancy type of situation, and also where, you know, maybe as farmers you don't want to necessarily commit to new actions for really long periods. So we're doing that, and I think at the moment when we sort of open the offer, there's going to be about 48 of the actions will be for 3 years, a couple that will be for 2 years, and then I think we're reviewing another sort of tranche of those that are currently set at 5 years to see if we can bring them down to 3 years again, so to try and make that much more flexible. And the facilitation fund, that's sort of another area of helping our ambitions. So we know that from working with lots of you in the pilot, sort of getting you together into groups, learning from one another, and sort of using information and support together, that we get much better sort of take up, we get more confidence with people doing things, and actually then working together to create sort of larger activities at scale, so hedgerow wildlife corridors through joining up hedgerows and things like that, is much better. And the facilitation fund, we've already sort of built on that this year, but we're going to expand it and improve it for 2024. So one of the things we're going to do is reduce the minimum size required. So at the moment we need to have a minimum holding size of about 2,000 hectares to qualify for a sort of facilitation fund support, and we're going to reduce that right down to 500 hectares. So that makes it much more available to sort of smaller groups, or where it's where you can have a number of farmers but not such a great amount of area. We're also looking at increasing the rates for facilitators, because lots of those that have been involved in the facilitation fund groups have said that the facilitator is key to keeping people, giving people that confidence, bringing people together, pulling them together, and keeping that inertia going. So we're looking at the rates that we can pay those those people to keep that work going, and also provide some more support for once people have come together in terms of how to keep those groups running, and to get the best results from them. So from an ambition point of view, as well as widening the scheme offers and making it much more comprehensive, we're looking at what else we can do, how we can build on that, just to sort of tip the balance and improve that environmental uptake. So if we move on to the next slide, I've just got some details here of the different themes that our new actions are in. So as we said, because we don't really have time, we want to be able to answer some more of your questions. We're not going to go through all the different actions and look at whether they're new or revised, but we will put the details of these in the annex, and so that you can have a look at those in your own time. And also there are more details in the technical annex that we published alongside the update to the agricultural transition plan last week. So again, there's some links that's in the chat now, and you can look at those, which give you a little bit more detail. But just as a summary, you can see here on this slide, these are all the different sort of areas, the themes that we have added on new actions available for this year, or revised existing ones to make them more appropriate, to make them more flexible. So there's a great range of different areas where new actions will be coming in that will be able to be accessed, and also through the joint scheme, so that you can put SFI actions and CS options together in a single agreement. So hopefully that gives you sort of a good overview of where we've been looking and what's coming in. And then if we just move on to, I think it's my last slide, there were just a few highlights. So Louise has mentioned some of these earlier on, but certainly through talking to you, although we've been sort of working with our pilot participants, and feeding in all the information that you've been giving us, the feedback and insight from the delivery of the standards that you've been working on. We've also had a lot of feedback around additional areas that perhaps we haven't had in the pilot, gaps that you can see that have arisen from delivering agreements and looking at existing schemes and the offers that are coming out. So there were just a few that we wanted to sort of highlight to show some of all of the stuff that the time that you've taken to write to us, to see us at our events and different learning activities, has all been listened to. And so the first one I was just going to mention was the farmland wildlife habitats on grassland. So particularly the species-rich grassland is really important. And we've taken on, a lot of that feedback that there was a gap there between the sort of the low no input grassland and the improved grassland, and some of the actions that are available for those. And then there's the species-rich grassland in the middle there that wasn't being, recognised, or lots of people felt wasn't being recognised. So as Louise mentioned right at the start of the presentation, we've looked at the maintenance, the creation and maintenance actions for those, and put them together into one action with a much higher sort of payment rate, which recognises the benefits that those types of grasslands and the habitats that they support provide. So we've done that. We've also introduced a new range of capital items that will support the creation of those, if that's how you're looking to sort of say restore or create that as well, and looking at where people want to do that in a very simple way, or if they want to be much more tailored and very specific to a particular area. So there will be much more flexibility around that. In addition to that, and we just put the payment rate in there so you can see that the payment rate has been considerably increased. There are also some different actions within the overall set of agreements where you can be more flexible around sort of grazing and cutting these grasslands, as long as we're still achieving the desired outcomes. We want to build in the maximum flexibility, because that's another thing that we've learned through talking to lots of you, that every area is different, or lots of farm persons have different different constraints or different topography that changes how they want to manage that. So we're doing that. We're introducing actions that are very specific for species rich in floodplain meadows again, and to help manage scrapes and gutters within these, and looking at later cut haymaking supplements as well, which will again help manage those different types of situations. So hopefully that's quite good news, and certainly fills an area where lots of you have told us that there was a gap there, or that you felt there was a gap in the schemes, and that will help to address that. In addition to the species rich, we've been trialing a hedgerow standard, or set of actions in a hedgerow standard through the pilot, and there's also been an updated version of that in the offer for SFI in 2023. But lots of you have said that obviously hedgerows are not the only type of boundary on farms, and those that have, there are some farms that don't have many hedgerows but have things like dry stone walls, earth banks, or the stone face hedge banks that all need consideration under these schemes. So from this year, we're expanding the sort of boundaries set of actions to include those. So we'll be including dry stone walls, which will be a payment for maintaining both sides of those walls. Earth banks and stone face hedge banks will be per side, so they'll fit within the boundaries theme. So there'll be a set of actions for those. We're also including ditches as well. So ditches are often counted as part of a boundary consideration, but they will be, so if you want to do some sort of simple ditch management, they'll be included as well, but they come under the water courses, water body and water courses set of actions, so they'll be there. Agroforestry, so Louise mentioned this. So agroforestry, I know lots of people in the pilot have mentioned and talked about agroforestry, and I know lots of those of you that are here tonight that have come from our tests and trials have been working on how we can look at incorporating agroforestry into our new schemes. So we're really pleased that we've been able to pull them together and to bring them out for the 2024 offer. So we'll be offering a range of actions that that fall within agroforestry, sort of infield agroforestry systems, across quite a wide range of density. So we've been the aim of those is to sort of appeal to people that that have not that have existing established systems, or people that would be interested but would like to perhaps take a more cautious approach, or those that feel that are constrained maybe through tenancy agreements as well. So they also will qualify for the premium payments, the agroforestry actions in this year as well. The sort of starting point, the very low density, doesn't even require a forestry environmental impact assessment, so it makes it really accessible. And the higher tree densities, where there are more sort of constraints around those, do allow you to do a lot more within the agroforestry practice. And in addition to the sort of the ongoing maintenance actions for those, and there'll be a range of capital items that support that, including sort of a capital item that looks to how to help you sort of plan your infield agroforestry systems, as well as planting the trees, and then things that we've already got in place, like sort of tree shelters or guards and things like that. So again, hopefully that's a really welcome addition to the suite of actions that will be available and that you can incorporate into different farming practices. And then finally, just wanted to mention access and education, because again, that's something that we hear a lot about, and we get lots of feedback from through sort of working with you in the pilot and tests and trials. So we are going to be doing increasing the existing schemes that we've got for access and education. And then bringing in some new ones. So we'll be bringing some new actions for upgrading existing accesses. Sort of, for example, looking at where we've got footpaths that you may want to or may consider upgrading to bridleways, or looking at access using existing rights of way, but where they're not as suitable for the less mobile. So looking at those, as well as sort of expanding the eligibility for educational access, the sort of groups that qualify for that expansion, under the scheme, to make it much more flexible, and also sort of creating that sort of joined up offer for both forestry and farmland and woodland together, because again, at the moment, they're slightly sort of different. So there'll be quite a bit more on the access education side. They're also going to be, we're going to continue with the capital items, so you can get capital items for way markers and fencing and hand washing facilities if you're doing sort of the educational side as well, and then also looking at what we can expand and what we can bring into that access, the capital offer as well. So these are just just a few of the sort of highlights, and certainly ones that we know that lots of you have talked to us about in our time sort of working with you over the last couple of years. But if you've, if you are interested, I would encourage you to just have a look at either the annex or the technical annex of these slides, or the technical annex that's published, to see the range of things that are coming in. At the moment, it's still at a relatively high level. In terms of, so it gives you an indication of where the action sits, the likely intentions of the action, its length, so whether it's 2, 3, 5, or 10 years, and the planned payment rate. So there isn't sort of the much more detail like we published in the handbook for SFI 23 at this stage, but that will be coming out later in the year and ahead of applications opening. But what we wanted to do is try and get as much information out to you now, so that you can see the sort of direction of travel, and start thinking about what you'd like to put into agreements going forward. So that's my slides over, but it does lead nicely on to how this will impact those of you that are already in the SFI pilot, and some of you are sort of already in your third year or just entering your third year now. So Liz is going to just take you through, so run through a few of the sort of implications for you with existing pilot agreements, and just some of the things to think about around that. So I'll hand over to you, Liz.
Great, thanks, Sam. So some of you may have heard this before, but I think now with the announcement of new actions in 2024, it's worth just having in the forefront of your mind. So the good news is you can stack SFI and SFI pilot agreements. So if you're in the pilot, you can apply for an SFI agreement now. But there are some things to be aware of if you're looking to co-locate actions and your pilot standards. So firstly, the land must be eligible for the relevant actions you wish to select, and do take a look at your land use codes before you apply for SFI, because sometimes if they're not correct, it does show up that you will have non-eligibility. So just make sure all of those land use codes are correct to make sure you don't have any errors as you go through the application. But yes, eligibility is one of the key aspects for you to have a SFI application as well. And the activities and the outcomes you're being paid for in each scheme are compatible with each other. So, for example, that you're not being paid to do one thing in one scheme and the polar opposite in another scheme. So it just means that they're not compatible. And you can't be paid twice for a similar activity. So if you're doing soil testing in one of your pilot standards, and in SAM 1, I believe, that's soil testing as well. So they wouldn't be compatible and will be known as double funding. But as you go through the SFI application, it will help you identify those areas and make sure that you're not applying for anything that you shouldn't be. And in terms of stacking your SFI agreement onto your SFI pilot, there are 3 actions that can stack on anything that you have, any standard or ambition level. So that's HRW1, IPM1 and NUM1. And some of our pilot participants have gone ahead and applied for those because it's easy to get their SFI agreement going with those 3 actions. So do take a look at the handbook for more information, and we've got some compatibility charts to help you identify which actions go with which standards and ambition levels. And that's in our transition toolkit for our pilot participants, and we've got that on our SharePoint site. We'll put some links in the chat for that toolkit, and I'll explain it a little bit more as we go through. And just to say how SFI is growing, we had a recent webinar in December where I told you we had about 7,000 applications started, 4,000 of which had been submitted, and then 2,500 have started and have live with their start dates and up and running. And now, just about 4 weeks later, we've got over 8,000 applications started, and 4,500 have now got live agreements, which is great news. So you can see how much it's growing, and in light of the 24 actions, I'm sure will further quite quickly. And with those applications, that's covering 12% of farmland in England at very early stages. So we're looking to make sure, looking to see that we hit our targets in the future with SFI. So some positive news for you, and just to show you that many are applying on that now. But just to recap a little bit about talking about the 24 offer, it's not available just yet. It will be later this year, and we will release a handbook ahead of the applications opening, similar to the 23 actions, so you can see exactly what's required for each of the actions. It's likely we'd do a controlled rollout of applications, again, similar to SFI 23. We may be asked to do an expression of interest, and then we contact you when it's your time to apply in stages until we're able to open it to anyone that would like to apply. If you have an SFI agreement, you can add in the 24 actions via your amendment window, or you may find it better to start a new SFI agreement, depending on when your amendment window is, if you want to start them as soon as possible. But just be mindful there won't be a management payment for that second SFI agreement. If you don't have an SFI agreement yet, you can apply now. You don't need to wait. You can apply for the 23 actions now, and then later when 24 is available, you can add in those actions in a following amendment window, which should be annually, or again, like you say, you can take out a new agreement if you'd like. We do have some good compatibility charts, which I know many of you have found useful when looking at SFI and the 23 actions. We don't have one yet for 2024, but this is a key document that we'd really like to prepare and share with you again in the future to help you decide with your pilot agreement what can work well together, and just to help condense some of the information for you. So beyond the end of the SFI pilot, so the pilot remains in its last year a really important part of learning and co-design part of our new schemes. Even with the 24 actions out there, that doesn't mean we've learned everything and we're going to stop and pack up. This is now even more important for us to continue right through the 3rd year of the pilot. So do continue to feedback to us, as we're always making changes, improvements, and informing our policy teams of the right ways to go following your feedback. You may start making plans to transition to other schemes when your pilot agreement ends, and we're here to help you with that. Like I mentioned, we've got your transition toolkit, and do visit farming.campaign.gov.uk. That's the SFI page where it should bring lots of information together for you. And I will just touch on the transition toolkit. So this will be updated with useful information regularly. It's a folder for SFI pilot participants on our SharePoint site. And there you can find some application videos. So there's one about land use codes, which is really important and useful in there. Our compatibility charts and links to where to get other advice as well is in there. But of course, we continue doing our information webinars like this one, our virtual and face-to-face events to help you through moving to SFI in the future and beyond the pilot. So that's everything from me. And I think it's back over to Louise to take you through the Q&A.
Lovely. Thank you very much indeed, Liz, and to Sam for providing us an overview of what's in the announcement and what it means in particular for our pilot agreement holders. So I said I'd just pause there for a moment just to allow people to have a look at the Q&A. We do have a number of questions that have been answered, so please do have a look. There's a couple of tabs. There's an open and answered tab. So if you're thinking, I may have I've asked a question and it's gone, where's it gone? It might have gone to the answered tab because the team have been busily in the background trying to answer some of your questions. So I'll give you a bit of a chance to have a look over those now. What we'll try and do is answer some of the questions that we've got left open. I've just been having a look through these and I can see some of these are quite technical questions. So we'll have a look, and if we can answer them, we will. And if we can't, we may need to come back to you if we need some technical expertise. We're hoping that somebody from the SFI scheme could be able to join us tonight, but unfortunately at the last minute they weren't able to. So if we run through the questions once from the top. So the first question that we've got is from Paul. So Sam, I think I'll need your help with this one. So under the new direct drilling SFI action, are we able to use a number of different cover crop destruction practices, or are we restricting to use glyphosate to qualify for the direct drilling payment? In certain circumstances, for example, following livestock grazing, can any cover crop regrowth be destroyed with shallow tillage? Sorry, Sam, that's quite technical.
Yeah, so I think, Paul, at the moment, that's a bit too technical, certainly for us to answer. And I think this is some of the detail that we're working through to be able to publish that sort of later this year. So the information will be available, as in, you know, what you can do, what are mandatory elements of being eligible for that that action, and what we're allowing through that. So some of that work is probably, I suspect, probably still being finalised and just agreed at the moment, which is why we've not been able to sort of share the greater details. But I know they've been looking at all the different sort of methods behind that, and making sure that we can provide as much flexibility in that to allow you to sort of manage that no-till work as best you can. But at the moment, I can't give you more detail on that at this stage. And I think possibly even if we had our sort of policy experts in there, that you know, at this stage there wouldn't be much more we could say.
Thanks, Sam, for that. I can see that some people put in your questions in the chat and one person's got their hand up. Unfortunately, we can't bring you in if you do have your hand up, so the team will reach out to see if you've got a specific question. Please do place your questions in the chat. We're going to go, please do place your questions in the Q&A. If you have placed your question in the chat, we may not get to it, unfortunately, because we have a number of questions open in the Q&A. So the next question that we've got is from Madeline, and I think it's some feedback that for us to note. We seem to have ended up with a great deal of archaeology, shine polygons on our farm. We worried about the impact they will have on our accessibility to options like SAM3, the herbal layer one and number 2, and I can completely understand that, Madeline, and I know that some of the actions you are restricted to what you can do if you do have historic features on your farm, but if you liaise with Historic England, which I'm sure you are in the process of doing, they should be able to give you precise details of where they are so you can avoid those areas of your farm. Sam, was there anything that you wanted to add to that?
No, I think the only other thing just to say is that with the we've put some details in the technical spec, but there are some, we've been going through the heritage and archaeological actions as well. So there are some revised ones so that take into account people that do have archaeological features on their land that are mapped as well. So there is some support through the schemes for sort of maintaining those and farming in conjunction with those as well.
Thanks, Sam. So we have a question here from Andrew. So it's a bit lengthy, but I'll try and cover most of it. Whilst we appreciate the rollout of further options, it's a little bit too late. Under the basic payment scheme, depending on exchange rate, we knew what we were getting, so £220 per hectare. Why is it so difficult to project what we might expect to get out of SFI, particularly beyond 2027? This is really important information for us to have confidence to invest, and why can't we commit to that, to our planning? So, Andrew, I hope you can see through what we're trying to introduce is that we are trying to give you a bit more certainty of payments going forward. So of the actions that we are introducing, some of them available through 3, 5, or even in some circumstances 10 years, 10 years of an agreement length. So you will be able to have that certainty in your payment rates for that length of time. So we recognise that it's an issue and we are trying to address that. But obviously at the moment, we do have some scheme. We have people that's in countryside stewardship. We still have BPS that is continuing till it fully reduces. And we are bringing on stream our live schemes. But we hope by introducing more content, and we've pushed boundaries even more than we were ever going to do by introducing those 50 new and updated actions this year, that will help you give some level of certainty in terms of what you can deliver on your farm over the next 5 to 10 years. Sam, anything you wanted to add to that?
No, I think it's always I know that it has lots of people have been wanting to know what's coming out and to be able to plan for that, and we're really aware of that. But I think we always took we've always taken the incremental approach and rolling things out whilst continuing to pay through the a reducing amount, but through the existing schemes, and so we're sort of continuing. But that's why some of these sort of early publications, although I know lots of you want more of the detail, we're trying, as soon as we have that information ready, we're trying to get that out to you to sort of help start that sort of planning process.
Thanks, Sam. So I think we've got some feedback from Robert. Seems yet again payments are being tailored to suit larger landowners more. I thought this was to help farmers fill the gap left by BPS. So the schemes are different to basic payment scheme, the new environmental land management schemes, and they are specifically designed to help us achieve our environmental ambitions and our environmental targets while supporting you to produce food production. And as you know, as being involved in either the pilot or test and trials or both, we've developed these offers working with you guys, taking your feedback on what works and what doesn't. So we do hope that offer is more attractive to a wider range of sectors and farms. And that's why we've really pushed hard to introduce as many actions as we are doing this year. And they will be attractive to a wider range of sectors. So we hope you can see that when you manage to have a look at the actions. And when we do send around the presentation, as we covered, you will see the headlines of each of the actions and have a look at them in a little bit more detail. Obviously, the handbook isn't due till later this year, which will contain all of the detail, but it will just give you more of an indication of what's coming on board. Sam, anything that you wanted to add to that?
No, I think that's fine, Louise.
Thanks. So a question from Bill. Will there be any funding for native breeds at risk and organic farming in SFI, which would allow tenants to claim them? So I'll hand this one over to Sam in a moment, but just to say that all of the actions that we have available currently in the SFI scheme and the ones that will be coming on stream are available if you are an organic farmer. So you should be able to apply like anybody else does for the actions. Sam, anything that you wanted to add on organic farming or native breeds?
Well, yeah, just to say, so we have been looking at the native breeds, and obviously one of the advantages by having a sort of combined offer is that you can then pick things that have traditionally been in mid-tier and add them to sort of actions that you've got in SFI. So we've been looking at what we can include within the native breeds and where that can apply. We've certainly done a lot of work on that from an upland perspective, but we're also looking at lowlands as well. So there'll be a bit more detail coming out with the handbook in terms of eligibility and where they fit and which actions and options fit together. But as I say, putting them together gives you a much greater range. So there's not necessarily a requirement for it to specifically sit within an SFI action now, because you'll be able to match them together and put them together. And the same with the organic farming as well. So we're going to be bringing some of the organic options across. And as Louise said, organic farmers should be able to apply for any of the actions as long as they're able to sort of deliver what's in those within their sort of farming businesses.
Thanks, Sam. So we've got a question from Dave. This is quite a technical one, so I'll see if you can answer it, Sam, but if you can't, we will have to take it away. So why is the haymaking supplement not available on low and no input grassland, please?
Yeah, so I'm not. I think that's probably relating to the current situation and where we are in the offer at the moment. But as I say, it sort of does apply the haymaking supplement, which is an updated countryside stewardship option that we've got. We're looking at eligibility of that. I think that's one of the ones that we're looking as to whether we can reduce that down to a 3-year duration as well to make it more flexible. So there should be a bit more flexibility around that going forward as we open out the full scheme.
Thanks, Sam. So we've got a question from James, and I think it was in relation to whether the high tier rates will be increased. So it's my understanding that all the rates will be increased and will be published, and the guidance will be updated with the new rates, and you will be written to through the Rural Payments Agency if you've got an existing agreement, and the rates will be increased, and they will be providing you with more details of that. Sam, anything you wanted to add to that? So we've got quite a technical question here that we might have to take away from Bill. Will naturally established trees that have self-seeded into areas of permanent pasture be eligible for any of the agroforestry actions? So that's a good question, Bill. I think this will probably be covered in the handbook when we see more details of what the action includes and the eligibility requirements and what you actually need to do to introduce that action. But I don't know whether there's anything you wanted to add to that, Sam.
No, I think you're right, Louise. I think we don't have the level of detail yet. I think the only thing I would say is the direction of travel, and as we've said in the presentation, is that we're very much aware about making sure that we do support those that have already created existing habitats or farming, sustainable farming practices, and so that they're supported through the schemes as well as creating new ones as well. So there is it will be looking at the sort of scheme eligibility and what you already have in place sort of fit within that, depending upon its sort of location and the density and how that's working. But again, there will be more details of the actual eligibility coming out.
Thanks, Sam. So we're coming up till nearly 7 o'clock. We have got a few questions that we haven't answered, so I will take a few more. There is a couple of technical questions that I think we won't be able to answer, and we really need to wait for the handbook to voice those over. We do have a question from Christine about HLS agreements and us not updating the payment, and does that apply for HLS agreements on common land? And Christine, I believe it does. Sam, can you confirm that? Or
yeah, I think it does apply to the HLS agreements as well. So we are working on how we can transition people across from the HLS agreements to the sort of wider SFI CS and indeed, if applicable, higher tier agreements sort of as we go forward. So at some point, we've talked quite a lot this evening about lots of different agreements, and we've had quite a few questions about stacking and things. And so I think our plan is to get those moved across, or to allow you to be able to move across as soon as possible. But obviously we've got to have all the schemes in place and the wider offer sort of suite of actions there to enable you to do that comprehensively, which is what we're working on at the moment. But so as far as I'm aware, the HLS rates will stay because they've sort of been bespokely put together and agreed for each agreement. They will stay for those terms, and those rollovers that have been agreed previously were to sort of provide some continuity going forward while we're in this sort of transition period.
Thanks, Sam. We've had some feedback on the timing of the webinar, given that the actions won't be available later this year. And what we felt was really important. So we know that this was information that we said that we would be publishing soon, and you were aware of what it was. And I know there's interest both with our pilot farmers and our test and trials farmers about what is going to be coming on stream in 2024, and particular how your work both through the test and trials and the pilot has helped shape where we're going in 2024. So we thought it was really important to give you an indication of what will be coming on stream, but also to reassure you that we know that there will be further details to follow, and we'll be holding further sessions like this, particularly for our pilot farmers, to go through what it means for them, particularly when their 3-year pilot agreements come to an end, to help them transition into the new offer. So we thought it was really important to give you an overview because you are our early adopters, and we wanted to thank you and recognise the feedback that you've given to help shape where we've got to. So we're almost up to time. Sam, is there anything that you can see that we haven't answered that we possibly can answer in the time we've got remaining?
I think there's a couple that are sort of similar. I think there was just one about a concern from Jennifer about if we sign up to schemes and there's a change of government. So I think obviously none of us can really predict what will happen if we have a change of government or a different administration. But if you sign up to a scheme, you certainly will. Those schemes, certainly from sort of past experience, and we've run these schemes and our different schemes through different administrations and times. But if you sign up to a particular scheme, that is going to be honoured for that period. But the way we've been working, the way we've been planning, has always sort of been based upon, certainly budget-wise, this Parliament and the confirmations we had from that. But going forward, that will obviously be considered by whoever's in administration at the time.
Thanks, Sam. Sam, anything else that you think we can quickly pick up before we close the webinar?
I think there's I think Mike's put in a question about technology-based actions. So there are some, particularly with the precision farming, there's some technology-based actions, and obviously as industry does change and things, we will keep those under review to make sure that the actions and the requirements that we've got are appropriate to what's available in the industry, what's classed as standard practice, but in a similar way that we do for the environmental ones. As practices change, regulations change, we'll keep the schemes under review to make sure that they fit and work appropriately with where the industry is.
That's great, Sam. Thank you very much indeed. I think we've gone past 7, so we will leave it there. Before we go, we just wanted you to complete a feedback poll, please. So we're really interested to hear how you felt about this. So please do, it's just one quick question. So please do complete before you disappear to enjoy your evening, because that will help us shape the content for further webinars that we do in the future. If you do have any more detailed feedback, please do email us at the SFI Pilot Learning email address that's displayed on the screen. But thank you very much for coming along this evening, for hearing about our update, and for asking some really good questions about the direction of travel and where we're heading. And thank you very much for the team for coming along, giving up their time this evening and helping answer some of those questions. So I'll just give you a couple of minutes just to fill in the survey, and please do, because that will help shape where we go. As I said, we will share the slides and a recording of this, so just be aware it'll be either by email or for our pilot farmers. We will be popping that into our area that we've got on SharePoint. Thanks. So we just ended there, Paul, there, and good to hear that the majority of you found that useful. If you didn't find it useful, please do let us know why you didn't find it useful, and email us. As I said, it really helps us to design the content for our next webinar. So thank you again for giving up your time this evening, and we will see you all again soon. Thank you very much, everybody.